Morning, or good morning, wherever you might be. It's sort of before 4 o'clock in the morning where I'm at. So, look, I'd like to say this is a sleepy time tea, but it's not properly. I've gotten through enough of it to think I will go to sleep. Probably a liver cleanser, I don't know. It's probably got astringent properties and will do a good job helping clean me out. So, what's the world do? What's its astringent properties? What's the world do to clean out? Oh dear, no, that's not the topic of today's video. But probably something along the lines that addresses business. Businesses aren't big enough to have the power they need to do well by society, and that's a crazy concept because we need the notion of the smaller business that addresses and deals and helps a small area, local area community. But in the modern world we find that businesses, when they get bigger, products get more streamlined. You know, at the end of the day, product prices might become cheaper to we the end consumer. That's sort of not really the way it plays out, and really the competition just gets more fierce and more fierce as the bigger companies sort of swallow up smaller companies, and they compete with other bigger companies with even more arsenal at their disposal. They've got more products and more services, and we're all so busy trying to choose from one or the other, and thinking that they meet our needs when they don't. We're too busy looking, and it can be political systems, it can be religions, it can be clothing, it can be whatever. We've got to make choices, and the choices that we are provided, if we were to take a step back and we were to really consider them, do they meet our needs? And so clothing's probably the easiest one here, that probably doesn't cause anybody's alarms on their radars, but it can be the materials that it's made from. And then other people have this notion of ethics and supporting ethical industries, and so they're interested in terms of where it's sourced from, were the working conditions good potentially for the employees that made it, was everybody getting a reasonable amount of money for their part of the supply chain. And we know that there's nothing about the modern world that is essentially propping up society. We certainly know that everything wants to take its cut from the individuals in society. But the sense of feeling good for all the hard work that we put in, for all the money that we might earn, and for our ability to spend that on things that might make us feel better, I would argue is quite questionable. And I don't think it's hard for anyone to see that. And if you're having a hard time seeing that, are the items around you bringing you inherent joy? Sometimes a new purchase, for a while, and then how long before you want to upgrade it or replace it? And it would seem that all of the items that we used to put at the top of the tree that we were really keen to get, with the exception maybe of couches or items you do buy for 20 years or more, I can't think of anyone buying a computer nowadays that lasts what it used to last for, and they used to have large run times, and then when you were done with them you generally passed them on. And I think we're finding in the modern world that a lot of the items don't even have that pass on value anymore. We look at it go, it's essentially worthless because it's falling apart. Everything's been built to run a certain amount of time, and we don't just call this obsolescence. We need to buy from companies that have warranty periods that actually last, and not because we want to use the item's warranty, but because we actually want the product to last. We want some reliability. And whatever the companies aren't big enough to incorporate the best technologies and the best evolution of parts, and whatever the companies are in a competitive market where they need to turn over a profit in such a way that they've got to constantly clamour above what their competitors are doing, we're finding that the products are being built for these cycles. And I'd like to say our planet can't afford it, but at the end of the day, we can't afford it. We don't have enough hours in our workday to waste on and I want to call them consumer durables because that's their technical term in a comment. If you study legal studies or commerce or something at school, and it gives you a sort of a wide periphery for understanding society and our role in it and what's going on. And it used to be consumer non-durables, consumer durables. And so food, something you eat on a daily basis, that's a non-durable. You've got to replace it and replenish it. But we used to consider these things like laptops and phones and whatnot as consumer durables. And how long before we consider them and actually change their definition to being non-durables. And I've made mention in other videos, the concept of really, as a human race, we need to come together. We need to pull the so-called patents and little things that everyone has to own an intellectual property or an idea that belongs just to them. And look, I'm all for that, so long as it is for the benefit or the betterment of the human race. And we're just not seeing in place. We're seeing this need for everyone to squirrel away more money and to climb up the top. And that's worked for us for very large amounts of time. But right now, if we are seeing, and I don't want to jump on the bandwagon of everyone saying that we're losing our middle class and whatnot, but the gap is becoming fairly big. And I guess that was where I identified with in life, is that I kind of rejected that, and it kind of went the low socioeconomic way. And I followed the footsteps of my mother and just went, look, I reject money. Money doesn't bring happiness. And I've probably experienced a lot in my life, but where I've always found that the middle class, at the end of the day, are keeping the rights in terms of consumer durables, because we can all buy from the same shops, we're all buying roughly the same things, and so because of a market existing to serve some customers, the other customers in other markets or other socioeconomic groups are getting access to the same items. And therefore, for me, it's always balanced things out a little bit. So it's sort of what we need, and whether we recognise that we need it, and everyone will say for us 1,000 other reasons why the class systems are needed and what's going on. Just for a second, be selfish and just think about the toys that you wish to buy. And look, and at the moment, this notion that's ramping up in speed, or the acceleration of everything in life is faster, including the usable times of our consumer durables. And if it keeps going the path it's going, I don't know where we're going to wind up. It just doesn't, there's nothing about it that makes sense. And so we can expect that big companies will swallow up more big companies, and so they'll be even bigger. And then what will they do? And it was made evident to me. I always take the wisdom of my family and my uncles, or people that have learned something in life and they've got something to share. And there was a fierce market competitive war, and I'll try not to name the players involved, but in the short term, they were willing to make sacrifices in terms of they weren't going to make as much money. They were going to do things to lure people into their camp. And it was explained to me that this short-term discount that we might get will bite us down the track. They'll have to get that money back. And so at the time I learned to support the small independents. And okay, I paid more money. But I found, and I'd like to go, look, there's lots of food products I buy that I find that the quality of them is just inherently better. It's objectively better, if you will. I mean, subjective is where it's only my opinion, my experience. But objectively better is where it can be measured. And objectively better is scientifically better. It's not just my opinion. And there's lots of food products that we find that because of a smaller production run, possibly because of the staff paying a bit more attention to what they're doing, or the better treatment of the life, be it animals or plants in the process, that the actual output product is better for it. A lot of what I've pitched in terms of essentially unifying, working together and building something new, using the best of our knowledge, the best of our education. And I often use the words technology, but I like to think technology is possibly also an overview of the systems. I've seen so many great business people refine systems and improve systems. And I alluded elsewhere that if we handbook every position, that you'd have no fear in your workforce of the position being short-term needing to be replaced if somebody can come in and have access to a handbook that gives that skill set. So there's all sorts of ways that technology can be implemented, and sometimes it's to do with administration systems or the ways that we operate. But when we operate using the best of what we know we can achieve, and we do so as a group, what we're going to find in the products and the quality of what we're buying, and I guess the satisfaction we feel for having earned and spent and had a product that actually returns. I mean, we always talk about return on investment, And a return on investment we associate with property and all these money markets and things that are valuable. But if you're low on the class structure, you need a return on investment on your TV. You know, if that's the biggest purchase you're going to make in the next couple of years, and when you're done using it, because you know there's an evolution in the standards that are needed to connect it to every other item in your entertainment arsenal, then you want to rotate that on. You don't just want to go, okay, now I'm done with it, and it's worth nothing to anybody else as well. You know, you invested good money in it. It might have been a large part of what money you had to, you know, it might have been going without rent. It might have been going without food. Look, I associate that as a child that deterministically at 16 years of age wanted to own all sorts of great stuff, and I had access to the world's best stereo systems at a consumer level. And these were my hobbies, you know. I would eat a lot of Wheat Bix, you know, and I found if I bought 8 litres of milk and a couple of big boxes of Wheat Bix, I could survive a lot. But did it do me any favour? Well, because I couldn't afford expensive items, good food, if you will, and my lack of vitamin C, and I think vitamin C props up and gives you a lot of gum or interior strength in your mouth in ways that probably doesn't have your teeth all kind of push around. Okay, so maybe I left home too early. Maybe I didn't take the wisdom of what should have been my parents. You know, I should have had lineage, and I should have had knowledge that was been handed on to me. But we're finding in the modern world everybody's cutting themselves short, and every person's an island, and their source of information is an uncaring pool of collected thoughts, and so I think we're all in this version. We're all slipping and sliding at all different paces in different ways, and we're really less for it. And so, admittedly, when the information superhighway rolled out to our doors, and it was such an easy rollout, really, wasn't it? I mean, it wasn't noisy. It wasn't the typical thing when you build a road and you hear for months all of this jackhammers and steamrollers and, you know, bobcats, whatever else is needed to make, you know, all the industrial sounds that come with rolling out of a highway, let alone a superhighway. The information superhighway just turned up at our doorsteps, basically unannounced. And we all championed it. We were so happy to have access to information at our fingertips. But like any domain, when businesses look to any growing industry or sector for how can we make money out of that, it didn't take very long. And the problem is, as consumers, we all pushed back, and we're not willing to spend a little bit of money for this glorious superhighway. And if we had it, and it's been postulated, hindsight being 2020, it's been thought about that if we'd all been willing to pay a little bit of money in the upkeep of said highway, if we're all willing to acknowledge that we should be putting something towards it, then the monetarisation of said information superhighway wouldn't have happened quite the way it did. And I mean, I don't want to say now that people are the products. You know, there's probably better videos out there on it. No, to be honest, I don't take on board a lot of these sorts of things. I kind of I trust in my heart as much as possible, and you know, and I use my mind, because I was always trained to you know, use the tools that are given you, and it's not hard. You don't have to look. You don't have to scratch the surface very much to see what's going on, and if you just apply, you know, a good indicator quite often is to look at the past, and we know the way these markets operate. We know what will happen in any given market based on what happens in every other market, you know, and how things play out. We know that money makes money, and we know that the businesses will invest money, possibly in the short term, to get control of the situation, and then make more money out of it. But this is all attached to an old paradigm. This notion that we need more money. Now, I've been talking about the low socioeconomic sector. I've been talking about people who might buy a TV, but for them that's an investment, and they need a return on that investment. But when we go to the other end of the scale, if we go right to the people who might have more money than they could ever need spend, whilst there might be some very refined products out there made in very small numbers, where due to scales of production, the amount of money outlaid versus what they get is not fair value, but they take the attitude of that's okay. You know, we've got enough money, and we won't notice it missing from the numbers on their screens. You know, intangible concept, these numbers that they'll never ever spend enough of. You know, that they can own more property, but more property just generates more numbers. You know, they can own more things, they can buy businesses, but at the end of the day, it's just numbers on a screen, and there's this real detached to it. And none of the healthy things that happen in society when we see people, we feel responsibility to these other people. Right? They're essentially removing themselves from that over these concepts of these little numbers on a screen. And so it's easy for them to buy products of a different quality level, perhaps to everybody else. But at the end of the day, if the world that they're in isn't stable or isn't safe, or if they have to, drive down the road, well, that road they have to share with other people, and if all those other people are in a different mind state because of the stresses in their lives or things that are going on, in the current world there's no real separating of that. So really it's forcing a situation where the people who, and I'm going to refer to them as the super rich, but it's forcing a situation where the super rich are feeling that they need to create a disconnect or a wall from what they might call the detritus, all the people with the problems. And we know that money is a solution to lots of problems, so they can only possibly see everybody else as having lots of problems. And we know that people with problems, I wouldn't want my child to date someone with lots of problems, because that's work, isn't it? We know we need to address these problems. We know that there's efforts needed, and most people don't have the time to address problems, and so the problems then they spring up in other ways in our lives, and they lead to all sorts of unhappiness. And I can understand why people would need to build a wall on the basis of they're afraid. Again, they've seen in other areas in life what happens when you've got all these problems or these stresses, and that it springs up in other ways, and so they just know preemptively, just protect ourselves from that. And it is actually widening a gap, and the wider the gap gets, nobody's getting happier, but nobody's getting happier on either side of the wall. And that's the true issue. And you can get short-term happiness, fleeting happiness if you will, where you go, I'm no longer having to deal with those problems, and just say, it's a Romeo and Juliet situation, and somebody from the other side of the wall comes over into this safe world, this happy world, this fleetingly happy world. Because money doesn't buy happiness per se; it buys a solution to life's problems, and the removal of a discomfort might give us the concept of feeling happy. But if we look to self-help books, or we look to books that might talk about happiness, again, it's a concept, arguably. But I feel that we've all probably channeled it at some point. And before the burdens of the world were put into our mindset, or even on the periphery of our minds, and I tried to shelter my child from even the concept of money for as long as possible, to try and shelter, to give the youth innocence and to let them enjoy said innocence. And in that time, where they have friends that are also in a state of innocence and everybody can engage at that level, we've had happiness, we know what joy is, we've experienced concepts like love, and it doesn't have to be physical love between people, there's different types of love. It's something that we should probably all explore more of, perhaps. And whatever we subscribe to, we worship at the temple of money, if you will, and the notion that it will bring us happiness. There's legitimate reason for why businesses need to operate fiercely and very competitively to squirrel away more money. And so if you're in the middle run, and you're in the businesses that are in a market where there's competitive businesses, and you need to make more profit than your competitors just to stay in said market, fine, but take a step back. And why are you trying to stay in said market? It's because you want to buy a spot on the other side of the wall. Imaginary wall, not a physical wall necessarily. You want to buy into a suburb where there might be people who are all shoulder to shoulder, potentially having less burdens or less stresses. And there's never been a time in history where we really need to just turn it around. We need to double down. We need the people on the other side of the imaginative wall to recognise that the best way forward for them to buy happiness is this notion of altruism at some level. And arguably, if they're giving up zeros on a screen that is essentially valueless to them, other than establishing a security in their lifestyle, which if you look at world events, nobody has, it appears, a security in their lifestyle. So yes, you need a lot more money now to really, really invest in something ridiculous to have potentially a secure lifestyle, until you become the lesser class in whatever aspect of society you're in, and then you're deemed the people who get the lesser quality products with the lesser durability, so that the people above you can make a little bit of money off you, because they don't want to deal with people who have woes and unhappiness and hardships. So eventually everyone becomes a target, and with the exception of, I guess there's an apex predator at the top, or there's the lion of our pack, there's the one with the biggest mane or the strongest muscle mass, and it's got Oh, I'm sorry, I feel a bit self-aware at the moment. Please, my hairstyle doesn't make me consider myself I'm not an apex anything. So yeah, look, everyone's like clamouring, and it's this battle that we don't even know how long it's going to run for, and what people are going to have to do to find happiness in it. And we just need to go the other direction. We need to unify it. It's mostly because these numbers on a screen don't bring happiness, but they could stabilise happiness for everyone. And if everyone has happiness, all of a sudden driving down the road again is safe and happy. All of a sudden going down to the regular coffee shop is safe and happy. And all of a sudden we can share society, and from that comes great things. And really we need diversity. It's a case of, we see it in all natural systems, that the more refined they become, the less resilient they become to all sorts of things. And as a human race, we need to preempt. I guess it's not a skill set we've ever shown, is that we look to the future and go, oh, maybe we should avoid that. You know, there's been some great docos I've seen, which is we're marching en masse to this cliff. We know it's coming. We know this drop is coming. We know we're going to all fall off and find ourselves in less than the situation we have now. And none of us stop the march. None of us make the changes needed to get there. And I guess these videos aren't written powerfully in a way to instill change or make you consider that there's possibly a difference in your way of life that needs to be brought about. It's not subtle. I don't want subtle changes. I don't want you tomorrow to go and do like one thing different. Although that's probably a great way if we all did that, you know. But that would be a different YouTube channel. And look, if I wanted to give living advice or something, I don't know what anyone would look to me for living advice. Look to your role models. Look to what they're doing. Why have you elected them to be someone special that you would take advice from? And please, you know, find great role models. You know, read bibliographies of incredible people. Maybe find out more and live right. But we need right now to take responsibility, and that is the notion that we can. I mean, that's a disconnect. I know nobody wants to have to be responsible because that sounds like work, but a little bit of work. It's called delaying gratification. You know, a little bit of work in the short term, if it brings us much greater happiness and much greater return on investment, if you will, a reward for our time, and not that far into the future. If we can turn it around, then shouldn't we? I mean, of course we should. I mean, that's a rhetorical question. Shouldn't we turn it around? Yeah, we all know we should turn it around. But what efforts do we take towards that end goal? And so I don't want to dribs and drabs this, because the problem is then people get bored of it, or they hit a milestone and they go, I'm satisfied now, and I'm going to leave it at that. We need to turn it around at a total level, at a fundamental construct level, and exist as something larger, and something that then we don't have to worry about the management of it. We don't have to worry about the fact that our milestone towards happiness is going to be maintained, that there is something altruistic that has this greater sense of happiness or an improved quality of life as its foundating principle. And it operates on such a large scale that nothing can come along and just buy it up and then turn it into something else so that somebody else can have a better tasting hamburger, because nobody can have a better tasting hamburger, right? It doesn't matter how much money you've got in the bank. If the technology is being made for where the masses are, then you know, you can buy it, but you get the same as everybody else. And if that technology is then filled with things that's relevant to their mindset, it's going to be stuff that's dealing with happiness or unhappiness at a level that's different to the few people. I'm going to refer to them as elite, but I'm not trying to create divides. You know, my videos are about unification, not dividing lines. But we're not going to find products that meet our needs if we continue down this path of separation. We're going to all find further and further disconnects. It's going to lead to further dissatisfaction. And that's assuming that all of our existing structures remain propped up. Alright, so I've given videos about why we need to move away from said structures. And I think there's lots of other people in the world that are giving videos non-stop about why we need to move away from this current cliff we're walking towards to march off. And really, for everyone who lists all the problems, I've always been told in workplaces and whatnot, if you're going to, by all means, This is an issue that needs to maybe be redressed, but you're probably being a little bit more helpful as a team member if you've got an idea in your mind, possibly towards a solution. And that's what I'm all about. Now, it's not just me. There's lots of people all around the globe that want a solution. Lots of people all around the globe that are presenting solutions. And they strive daily to come up with incredible ideas that might be breakthroughs in terms of environmental ways we can just turn things around. The cliffs that we thought we'd already walked off, we haven't, because of an evolution in technology or an evolution in thinking sometimes, a change in the way that we can do things. And really, if we put it all together, we're absolutely fine. So really, we just need to change one thing, and that's our concept about we can't do it. And we have to change it to a concept of we can do it. And ultimately, we need to live by the mantra of I am doing it. And we can do that. We do that together. And then it's not just I am doing it. We're holding hands, or we're locked, and obviously, and for germaphobes out there, for people that are afraid of being within 10 metres of other people, or around people who aren't wearing masks, let's just say this is a concept for a future time, or let's just say it's just a mental image, if you will, and the idea of what I have been presenting. If anyone's picked up on the concept that you can elect at so many levels of the things that you want, and you get the support and a structure that supports the things you want, because in a human race as big as we've got, so many groups of like-minded sorts are out there, and just a little bit of shuffling it around and creating it so that it's sort of almost tiered as it spans out, that the neighbourhoods around yours, your neighbourhood might support 90-95% or 100% of the same concepts, things that you find the most important. And then the structures around you, the suburbs around you, a little bit further down the track, 5 kilometres down the road, might be built of communities that are 95% like yours. And then further down the road is communities 90% like yours. And that way we find that in travelling distances, that there's always people that are mostly like yourself. And so sure, if you've got absolute germaphobes that want to hide away in caves and they want to live so far away from people, that's fine. But as you get closer and closer to them, you become more and more aware of what's important to them. Just in the change, and I can't say the landscape, because we don't change up people's accommodation based on what's important to them. We don't change up their quality of living because of what's important to them. But we become sensitive to the needs of others. And so if it's important to you to get access to a mall first thing in the morning, when the air's been cycled out and the disinfectant's been run over every product, and that's really important to you, then the people you're going to see at the mall during that hour are also going to share those values. Now, it's zany to pitch this idea, because that aspect of it is complete separation. But it's not separation by a socio-economic barrier. It's separation by the concept of being able to sustain ourselves with people that also hold true our values. And that's no different to what we're doing in society right now. Now, you only have to look at, and I think of church groups, and I just look at church groups, and they seldom socially hang out with people outside of their value system. And generally it's because they recognise then that the other people have woes or pains. That's their wall, that people on the outside of that wall have so many troubles going on that aren't relevant to their group, that they haven't really almost got a common dialogue where they feel that they can just talk about happiness in the same open-hearted way. And so they put up a natural facade to almost protect their internal happiness. Well, we all have walls at so many different levels, so many different facades going up. So it's mad if we don't acknowledge that. We do. And we all have a calling or an inner desire or a need for that to be nurtured. But that it can be nurtured, and it can be nurtured in a peaceful society that is about tolerance. And in order to do that, we need to see the similarities. And we need to see that we can have all sorts of diversification and have a lot of common traits in play, a lot of similarities in play. And when we start operating from a place of peace, and a place of we can be more accepting, because people that are extreme to our value sets aren't randomly going to be in our personal space, or therefore threatening to us, or we need to be fearful of them. And again, that's just based on current fears. But because of our current world is coming from a base of fear, we need to gradually